The Sterling mansion stood tall and unshakable, a monument of wealth that overlooked the glittering skyline. Inside its grand halls, silence carried a heaviness that no amount of gold-plated chandeliers or Persian carpets could soften. Richard Sterling, one of the most powerful billionaires in the country, sat at the long dining table, staring at the untouched glass of wine before him. He had everything that men dreamed of: success, power, influence, and unimaginable riches. Yet, when the echoes of laughter faded and the meetings ended, he was left with a silence that gnawed at his chest. That silence was interrupted only by the soft sound of a child's footsteps. Richard turned his head and found Lily, his 8-year-old daughter, standing at the doorway in her pale blue nightdress. Her small fingers clutched her worn-out teddy bear, its fur thinned from years of being hugged. Her big, expressive eyes met his, and though her lips never parted, her gaze spoke volumes. Lily had been mute since birth. Doctors claimed her vocal cords worked perfectly fine, but her silence came from somewhere deeper, an emotional wound or mystery no one could explain. Since the day her mother had died in childbirth, Lily had never spoken a single word. Richard sighed and patted the seat beside him. Lily padded across the marble floor and sat close, her tiny hand reaching for his larger one. She squeezed it gently, as if to remind him that despite the silence, she was still there, still his daughter. But Richard's heart remained troubled. Raising Lily alone had been a struggle he could never admit publicly. The staff adored her, but she rarely trusted anyone outside her small circle of caretakers. And Richard knew, sooner or later, she would need more than what he could provide. "You need a mother, Lily," he murmured, though he knew she couldn't, or wouldn't, reply. In his world of power and prestige, a man like Richard couldn't remain single forever. His board members often whispered about stability, his friends reminded him of appearances, and society expected him to remarry. He had brushed off the pressure for years, but now, seeing Lily's loneliness mirrored in her eyes, he felt the urgency more than ever. But who could fill such a role? Richard had dated women since his wife's passing, models, actresses, socialites, each more glamorous than the last. But none had shown true warmth toward Lily. They treated the girl as an accessory, something to tolerate in order to win Richard's favor. Each time, Lily would withdraw further, retreating into her silence until even Richard grew ashamed of his poor judgment. He leaned back in his chair, his fingers tapping the table rhythmically. He needed a solution, something decisive, something grand. Then an idea struck him. He would host an event, one unlike any before. He would invite the most beautiful, accomplished women from across the city. He would give Lily the freedom to choose among them. After all, no one knew what Lily needed better than Lily herself. For once, the decision wouldn't rest on his shoulders, it would rest on hers. Richard's lips curled into the faintest smile. He imagined a glamorous stepmother, someone to guide Lily, someone to complete the family picture he had been missing. Perhaps with the right influence, Lily might even find her voice. "Tomorrow, everything changes," he whispered under his breath. Lily tilted her head curiously, her small hand tugging at his sleeve as if sensing the weight of his thoughts. He brushed her curls gently and kissed her forehead. "You'll choose, my little one," he said softly. "You'll choose who will be your mother." The mansion's vast halls swallowed his words, echoing back a promise that would soon unravel into something Richard never expected. Because fate, as it often did, had its own plans. The Sterling mansion buzzed with life the following evening, transformed into a stage of glamour. Golden chandeliers shimmered like constellations above, while crystal glasses clinked and the faint hum of a live piano floated across the air. Word of Richard Sterling's exclusive gathering had spread like wildfire through the city's elite circles. Everyone wanted to know who would capture the heart of the elusive billionaire. The models arrived first, stepping out of sleek black cars that lined the driveway. Each was breathtaking in her own way, tall, elegant, draped in designer gowns that shimmered under the glow of camera flashes. They greeted one another with air kisses and practiced smiles, though behind every expression lay fierce competition. To be chosen as Richard Sterling's wife meant wealth, influence, and power beyond imagination. Inside, Richard stood near the grand staircase, his expression unreadable as he welcomed the women. But his sharp eyes weren't searching for beauty. He had seen more beauty in his life than he could count. What mattered was Lily. And there she was, perched quietly on the edge of the staircase, her teddy bear tucked firmly under her arm. Dressed in a soft lavender dress, her dark curls framed her innocent face as she gazed curiously at the women parading before her. The models gave her polite nods and forced smiles, though some barely acknowledged her presence at all. "Your daughter is precious," one of them cooed, bending slightly to Lily's level. But her eyes quickly flicked back to Richard, her words more performance than sincerity. Lily blinked, tightened her grip on her teddy, and looked away. Another model leaned close to Richard, whispering, "She's shy, isn't she? Don't worry. With me, she'll open up in no time." Her laugh was rehearsed, her perfume overwhelming. Richard's jaw tightened. He'd seen this act before. Smiles for him, dismissiveness for Lily. It was the same pattern that had broken his heart every time. Yet tonight was different. Tonight, Lily had the power to decide. As the evening stretched on, the mansion turned into a runway of vanity. Laughter rang too loudly, compliments dripped like honey, and conversations circled around money, fame, and social standing. Every model seemed to compete for Richard's attention, flaunting charm and grace, but none took the time to truly see Lily. Except one person. Standing quietly at the edge of the room, unnoticed by most, was Rosa, the maid who had worked for the Sterlings for years. Dressed simply in her uniform, she carried a tray of drinks, moving with the ease of someone used to being invisible. Yet her eyes were warm, her smile gentle, and unlike the models, she paused when she passed Lily on the staircase. "Are you okay, sweetheart?" Rosa asked softly. Lily looked up, and for the first time that evening, her small lips curled into the faintest smile. Richard caught the exchange, though he said nothing. The irony didn't escape him. Here was a room filled with the city's most glamorous women, yet the only person who had drawn a genuine reaction from his daughter was the one woman who wasn't even supposed to be part of the contest. The models continued to dazzle, but Richard couldn't shake the image of his daughter smiling at Rosa. It was small, fleeting, but powerful. And in that moment, a question stirred in his heart, one he wasn't ready to voice. Would Lily's choice surprise them all? The night wore on, filled with glittering gowns and shallow laughter. But for Lily Sterling, the party was little more than a parade of strangers who looked at her like an accessory rather than a person. She sat curled up on the staircase, her small hands wrapped around the worn teddy bear she never went anywhere without. Each time one of the glamorous models approached, her heart shrank a little more. "Hello, darling," one said in a sugary voice, crouching too low with a smile that never touched her eyes. "Don't you want a new mommy who can take you shopping?" Lily pressed the teddy bear against her face, avoiding her gaze. The model's smile twitched before she rose and walked away, her heels clicking sharply against the marble floor. One after another, the women tried to charm her, each in their own polished way. But Lily could sense the hollowness behind their words. They didn't see her, they only saw her father. And then Rosa walked by. The maid carried a silver tray of drinks, weaving between the clusters of models without calling attention to herself. Her dark skin glowed under the chandelier light, and there was a calmness about her presence that seemed to soften even the edges of the noisy room. As she passed the staircase, she noticed Lily's withdrawn figure. Pausing, Rosa leaned down slightly, her voice gentle. "Hey there, little princess. You've been quiet all night. Are you okay?" Lily looked up, surprised. Rosa's tone wasn't forced. It wasn't syrupy or calculated. It was warm, genuine, like the kind of voice that wrapped you in a blanket on a cold night. For the first time, Lily let out the smallest giggle. It was barely there, like a whisper of joy, but Rosa noticed. Her smile deepened. "Ah, there it is. That's a beautiful smile." Much better than hiding behind that teddy. She winked playfully. Lily blinked at her, then clutched the teddy a little less tightly. Rosa didn't ask for anything. She didn't try to impress. She didn't even seem to care that Richard Sterling was standing just a few feet away. She only looked at Lily, as though she were the most important person in the room. Richard, watching from across the hall, felt a pang in his chest. He had spent months trying to bring joy back into his daughter's eyes, yet it was Rosa, the maid, who did it effortlessly with a single smile. Later, when Rosa returned with an empty tray, Lily surprised her by whispering, "Your smile, it's nice." Rosa's heart softened. She crouched down to Lily's level, resting her hands lightly on her knees. "And yours is even nicer. Do you know why? Because it comes straight from here." She gently tapped Lily's chest over her heart. Lily blushed, looking away shyly. But she didn't hide behind her teddy this time. As the models continued their charade, Rosa excused herself from serving and sat near the edge of the staircase for a brief moment, just so Lily wouldn't feel alone. They didn't talk much, but they didn't need to. The silence between them was comforting, like two people who understood one another without words. For Lily, it was the first time in a long time that someone had made her feel seen. As the night drew to a close, Richard approached his daughter. "So, Lily, what do you think of the ladies tonight?" She looked up at him, then at the sea of glittering gowns, her small face serious. Her lips parted, and Richard leaned in, expecting her to whisper the name of one of the models. Instead, Lily pointed her tiny finger across the room. "At Rosa. The maid," Lily said softly, but firmly. "I like her smile." The models gasped. Richard froze, and Rosa's tray nearly slipped from her hands. In that moment, the entire game changed. Richard Sterling had closed billion-dollar deals with a single handshake, silenced hostile boardrooms with one sharp glance, and navigated the ruthless world of business with cold precision. Yet at that moment, standing in his own mansion, surrounded by stunned models, with his little girl pointing toward the maid, he felt utterly powerless. "The maid?" he repeated, his voice a mixture of disbelief and restraint. Lily nodded innocently, clutching her teddy bear. "Her smile makes me feel happy, Daddy. I want her." The words hung in the air like a thunderclap. Several of the models scoffed, their perfectly painted lips curling into sneers. One whispered just loud enough, "A maid? Really?" Another laughed under her breath, the sound sharp and dismissive. Richard cleared his throat, trying to maintain composure. "Sweetheart, you're supposed to choose from." His hand motioned vaguely toward the cluster of women dressed in silk and diamonds. "From the ladies here tonight." Lily shook her head firmly, her small curls bouncing. "I don't like them. They don't look at me." "She does." Her finger stayed pointed at Rosa, who stood frozen, a tray trembling in her grip. Richard glanced at Rosa, and for the first time truly looked at her, not as staff, not as background, but as a woman who had somehow touched his daughter's guarded heart. He saw the shock in Rosa's wide brown eyes, the way her lips parted as though she wanted to speak but dared not. "Sir," Rosa stammered, her voice barely above a whisper. "She doesn't mean." But Lily cut her off with the blunt honesty only a child could have. "I mean it. I want her." Richard felt the weight of every eye in the room pressing down on him. His reputation, his authority, the entire image he had built. Suddenly, it all felt fragile in the face of his daughter's simple declaration. "Sweetheart," he said carefully, crouching down to Lily's level, "you know Daddy wants you to be happy." "But Rosa, she's not." He paused, realizing there was no kind way to finish that sentence. "Not suitable? Not good enough?" The words tasted bitter in his mouth. "Not what?" Lily challenged, her young face suddenly fierce. "Not pretty enough? Not rich enough? She makes me smile. Isn't that what a mom should do?" Her words cut deeper than any corporate rival ever had. Richard opened his mouth, then closed it again. Behind him, the murmurs of the models grew louder. Some were offended, others amused. One finally broke the tension, her voice dripping with condescension. "Mr. Sterling, it's sweet she's attached to the help, but surely you wouldn't." "Enough." Richard's voice snapped like a whip, silencing the room instantly. His gaze swept across the women, sharp and unforgiving. He didn't tolerate disrespect in his business, and he wouldn't tolerate it here. The models fell quiet, their painted smiles stiffening. Rosa lowered her eyes, wishing she could disappear. Richard straightened, running a hand through his hair. He had built his empire by making decisive choices, yet in this moment, he hesitated. What was truly at stake here? His pride, his image, or his daughter's happiness? When he looked back at Lily, he saw not just a little girl clutching a teddy bear, but his daughter, the only family he had left, the one piece of his world that wasn't about money, power, or control. And she was asking him for something simple, to let her heart choose. Richard let out a long breath. "All right, Lily. I hear you." Lily's face lit up with relief. She threw her arms around his neck, whispering, "Thank you, Daddy." But as he held her, Richard's mind churned with unease. This wasn't a business deal he could control. This was a path he never anticipated, one that could change everything. And standing in the corner, Rosa realized the same. She had never asked to be part of this world, yet now she was caught in its center. For Richard Sterling, the billionaire who always had the answers, this was the one dilemma he wasn't sure how to solve. Rosa could barely sleep that night. She sat at the edge of her small bed in the staff quarters, staring at the moonlight filtering through the window. The echoes of the evening replayed in her mind, the laughter of the models, Lily's tiny but firm voice, and Mr. Sterling's sharp command that silenced the room. Never in her life had she felt so exposed, so utterly out of place. She had taken this job to earn an honest living, to support her mother and younger brother back home. She cleaned rooms, served meals, and faded into the background as the rich lived their glamorous lives. That was how it was supposed to be, quiet, invisible. But now, because of one innocent choice from a child, she was standing under a spotlight she never wanted. "Choose a mother," Rosa whispered to herself, her voice trembling. "And she chose me." The very thought made her chest tighten. She adored Lily. Anyone would. The girl's sweetness and vulnerability touched her heart. Rosa had often sneaked little candies into Lily's hand after dinner or told her short stories while tidying up the nursery. But being her mother? That was something else entirely. By morning, Rosa's nerves were frayed. She tiptoed through the mansion's grand halls, praying she wouldn't bump into Mr. Sterling. Her plan was simple: keep her head down, work quietly, and hope the incident faded from memory. Children said strange things all the time. Surely Lily would forget. But Lily hadn't forgotten. As Rosa carried a tray of breakfast to the dining room, Lily bounded in, her curls bouncing and her teddy tucked under one arm. "Good morning, Mama," she chirped, her innocent eyes shining. The tray nearly slipped from Rosa's hands. Lily," she stammered, glancing around nervously. A few maids had stopped to watch, whispering behind their hands. Rosa forced a shaky smile. "You shouldn't call me that." "But you are," Lily insisted, hugging Rosa's leg tightly. "I picked you. Daddy said he hears me, so that means it's true." Before Rosa could respond, Mr. Sterling entered the room. His sharp eyes immediately caught the scene, Lily clinging to Rosa like she belonged there. "Lily," Richard said firmly, though his voice softened when he looked at his daughter. "We'll talk about this later. Go finish your breakfast." Lily pouted but obeyed, skipping off to the table. Rosa straightened, her heart pounding as Richard's gaze fixed on her. "Mr. Sterling, Rosa," he interrupted, his tone measured. "I know this isn't easy for you. But Lily, she hasn't smiled like this in a long time. I don't want to crush that. Rosa clasped her hands together, her fingers trembling. With respect, sir, I'm just a maid. People will laugh. They already did last night. I can't. You don't need to be anything but yourself, Richard said quietly, surprising her. Lily doesn't care about money or appearances. She sees something in you that I, perhaps, never could. His words unsettled her. Was it kindness? Admiration? She couldn't tell. But she knew one thing. Being seen, truly seen, by the billionaire she worked for was dangerous ground. I can't be her mother, Rosa whispered, her eyes dropping. I wouldn't know how. And people like me don't end up in worlds like yours. Richard's jaw tightened. He wanted to argue, but something in her trembling voice silenced him. He understood. She wasn't refusing Lily out of coldness, but out of fear. That evening, Rosa sat in her room again, staring at her reflection in the tiny mirror. She thought of her mother's calloused hands, her brother's hungry face, the endless sacrifices. Maybe this was why she was chosen, to be reminded that love wasn't about status or wealth. But still, Rosa couldn't shake the fear. She cared for Lily, yes, but stepping into that role meant opening herself to ridicule, heartbreak, and perhaps something even scarier, hope. And hope, she knew, could be dangerous. News travels fast when it involves the rich, the powerful, and the unexpected. Within days of Lily's bold declaration that she wanted Rosa, the maid, to be her mother, whispers had turned into headlines. Billionaire's daughter chooses maid over models. Fairy tale or scandal. Richard Sterling's household in uproar. By the time Rosa went to the market to buy bread and vegetables, people were already staring. Some smiled with curiosity, others sneered. A woman muttered under her breath, "A maid playing lady of the house? Absurd." Another whispered, "But maybe, it's kind of beautiful." Back at the mansion, things weren't easier. The models who had been parading through the halls days earlier now looked at Rosa with venom. Their laughter followed her like a shadow. "Imagine," one scoffed as Rosa walked past with folded laundry. "She doesn't even know which fork to use at dinner." "Richard must have lost his mind," another replied. Rosa said nothing, but each word sank deep. She had never asked for this attention. She had never dreamed of replacing anyone's mother. She only wanted to protect Lily, to comfort her. Yet now she was the center of a storm she never sought. Still, Lily's love never wavered. Every morning, she greeted Rosa with open arms and an innocent smile. "Mama Rosa, can we bake cookies today? Mama Rosa, will you tell me a story before bed?" Her joy was simple, untainted by society's judgment. For Lily, the choice wasn't about status or beauty, it was about love. One evening, Richard hosted a grand dinner. Business partners, wealthy investors, and yes, a few of the scorned models filled the glittering dining hall. Rosa tried to keep to the background, serving quietly. But Lily had other plans. Climbing onto a chair, Lily clapped her little hands to silence the room. "I want everyone to know," she announced with a proud smile, "this is my mama." She pointed straight at Rosa. The room erupted. Some gasped. Some chuckled cruelly. One businessman whispered too loudly, "Richard Sterling's heir, raised by a maid? What a disgrace!" Rosa froze, her face burning. She wished she could vanish. But before she could flee, Richard's voice boomed across the hall. "Enough!" The laughter died instantly. All eyes turned to him. Richard stood tall, his jaw tight, his gaze unflinching. "You can mock me all you want," he said, his voice commanding. "But you will not mock my daughter, or the woman she trusts. Rosa has given Lily something none of you could buy, charm or fake, unconditional love." Silence fell, heavy and thick. No one dared speak. For the first time, Richard wasn't just the cold billionaire they all knew. He was a father, stripped of pretense, defending what truly mattered. Later that night, after the guests had gone, Rosa stood quietly in the garden, trembling under the weight of it all. Richard approached her, his expression softer than she had ever seen. "You didn't ask for this," he said quietly. "But Rosa, you've given Lily what I never could. A mother's warmth. For that, I'll always be grateful." Her eyes stung with unshed tears. "I'm not sure I'm strong enough," she admitted. "People will never see me as her mother. They'll always see me as less." Richard shook his head. "The world doesn't get to decide who you are. Lily already has." That night, as Rosa tucked Lily into bed, the little girl whispered, "Promise you'll never leave me, Mama." And with her heart steady at last, Rosa answered, "I promise." For the first time, she believed her own words. She wasn't just the maid anymore. She was Lily's mother, by love, by choice, and by courage. And sometimes, love was the only title that mattered. The days after Richard's powerful declaration at the dinner were a whirlwind. The story of the billionaire's daughter choosing the maid over glamorous models had exploded beyond whispers. It had gone global. News anchors debated it on television, tabloids splashed it across glossy covers, and social media spun countless narratives. #MaidMother began trending online. Some mocked it, others turned it into satire, but surprisingly, many rallied behind Lily's choice. Finally, a story about love over status, one influencer posted. "Rosa is the true definition of grace," another wrote, sharing a picture of Rosa carrying groceries while Lily clung to her hand. But not all reactions were kind. Some journalists painted Rosa as a manipulator, the maid who schemed her way into the sterling fortune. Others accused Richard of having a scandalous affair with her, rumors that made Rosa's cheeks burn with shame. Richard, however, never wavered. In an interview with a prominent news outlet, he addressed the gossip with calm certainty. "Rosa was never chosen by me. She was chosen by my daughter. And that makes her more than worthy of respect. Wealth and beauty don't make a mother, love does." The world, hearing a billionaire speak with such raw honesty, began to soften. Little by little, mockery turned to curiosity, and curiosity turned to admiration. Inside the Sterling mansion, the atmosphere changed too. The models stopped visiting, their perfume and forced laughter no longer haunting the halls. Rosa's role, once confined to scrubbing floors and polishing silver, subtly transformed. She still helped around the house. She wasn't above work, but she was no longer invisible. She was acknowledged, seen, even valued. For Lily, nothing had changed. To her, Rosa had always been Mama. But now, she wore the title proudly, introducing Rosa to visitors without hesitation. "This is my Mama. Isn't she beautiful?" Rosa would blush, embarrassed, but a small smile always followed. She had never been called beautiful so sincerely before. One evening, Richard invited Rosa and Lily to a charity gala. At first, Rosa refused. "I don't belong there. People will laugh." But Richard gently insisted. "If Lily wants you by her side, then you belong more than anyone." When the night of the gala came, Rosa wore a simple dress Richard had arranged, a soft navy blue gown, elegant but modest. Her hair, usually tied back while she worked, was styled loosely around her shoulders. As she entered the ballroom with Richard and Lily, the room went silent. For a moment, the whispers threatened to crush her. Then Lily's small hand tightened around hers, and Rosa lifted her chin. All night, people watched. Some judged, some sneered, but others approached her with genuine warmth. A woman from a charity foundation told Rosa, "What you've done for that little girl is more valuable than all the diamonds in this room." By the end of the night, Rosa realized something remarkable. The world would always talk, but she didn't have to listen. Later that evening, back at the mansion, Richard found Rosa standing in the garden again, her eyes reflecting the moonlight. "You carried yourself with dignity tonight," he said quietly. "I was terrified," she admitted, a nervous laugh escaping her lips.
"But you stayed," Richard replied, his gaze steady.
"That's what matters. That's what makes you strong." Rosa's heart swelled, not from Richard's words alone, but from the knowledge that, slowly, the world was beginning to see her the way Lily always had. Not as a maid, not as an outsider, but as family. And for the first time, Rosa allowed herself to imagine a future where she truly belonged. Weeks passed since the gala, but its echoes lingered. Photos of Richard Sterling with his daughter and the mysterious maid-turned-mother circulated widely, sparking endless debates. Every gossip magazine wanted Rosa's story. Every journalist wanted her interview. Yet Rosa stayed quiet, refusing the noise. She wasn't chasing fame. She only wanted peace for Lily. But peace was hard to come by. Even within the Sterling estate, not everyone approved. Richard's sister, Eleanor, visited one afternoon, her diamond necklace glinting as sharply as her words. "Richard, this is madness. How can you let your daughter be raised by a servant?" Rosa, who had been arranging flowers nearby, froze. For a moment, shame threatened to swallow her whole. But Lily's laughter floated in from the garden, and Rosa straightened. "She's not just a servant," Richard said firmly. "She's family." Eleanor scoffed, muttering about reputations, but her words carried less weight than before. Richard's declaration had been made in public. There was no taking it back. And yet, despite the resistance, Rosa felt the winds shifting. The staff who once looked at her with pity or jealousy now treated her differently. Some even came to her for advice, drawn to her calm presence. For the first time in her life, Rosa felt she had a voice that mattered. One crisp autumn evening, Richard surprised both Rosa and Lily. "I want us to have dinner together," he said. "Not you serving. Not Lily at the children's table. All of us as family." The long oak dining table, usually reserved for lavish banquets with powerful guests, felt strangely intimate that night. A fire crackled in the hearth, casting a warm glow. Lily sat between Richard and Rosa, chattering about her day at school. At first, Rosa felt out of place. She fumbled with the silverware, conscious of the expensive china. But then she looked at Lily, who was eating spaghetti with all the grace of a child, and she relaxed. "Do you like it?" Richard asked gently. "It's beautiful," Rosa whispered. "I've never sat at this table before." Richard's expression softened. "Then from now on, you'll sit here every night. This is your place, Rosa." The words sank deep, sweeter than any promise of wealth. Rosa realized she wasn't just being tolerated, she was being embraced. News of Rosa's new place in the Sterling family reached the outside world quickly, of course. Some sneered at the maid sitting at the master's table, but others admired the boldness of it. For many, it became a story of hope, that love could rewrite even the strictest boundaries of class and privilege. Lily, meanwhile, blossomed more than ever. Her asthma improved with Rosa's constant care, her laughter filling every corridor of the mansion. Whenever someone asked who her mother was, she no longer hesitated. "Rosa. Always Rosa." Late one night, after Lily had gone to bed, Richard and Rosa lingered in the living room. The silence between them was comfortable, filled with unspoken things. Finally, Richard spoke. "You've changed this house, Rosa. You've changed me." Her breath caught. She wanted to protest, to insist she was still just the maid, but something in his eyes stopped her. For the first time, Rosa allowed herself to dream, not just of belonging, but of being truly loved. The girl who once hid in the shadows now had a seat at the table. And though the world might never understand, within the walls of the Sterling mansion, a new kind of family was being born. The morning sun poured through the tall windows of the Sterling mansion, gilding the breakfast table in gold. Lily hummed softly to herself as she spread jam on her toast, her curls bouncing with each movement. Across from her, Rosa sipped tea, still marveling at the strangeness of sitting there, not as a maid but as a mother. Richard, watching them both, felt a warmth he hadn't known in years. For so long, he had tried to fill his life with models, business deals, and glittering events. Yet the quiet laughter of his daughter and the steady presence of Rosa brought him more peace than all his wealth combined. Still, the world outside hadn't fallen silent. News outlets continued to hound them. Sterling chooses made-over models splashed across magazine covers. Reporters camped outside the estate gates, desperate for photos. Rosa tried to avoid the headlines, but she saw the strain in Richard's eyes. He was a man used to controlling narratives, and now the world was writing one for him. One evening, Richard made a decision. "We're going public," he said firmly, looking at Rosa across the sitting room. "No more hiding. The world deserves to know the truth, and Lily deserves to see that we're not ashamed." Rosa's heart pounded. She had never spoken in front of a crowd, let alone cameras. But what if they laugh at me? At us? Richard reached across and took her hand, the gesture both protective and tender. "Then let them laugh. Because I know who you are, Rosa. And I want the world to know it too." The press conference was held at a grand Sterling hotel ballroom, packed with flashing cameras and whispering journalists. Richard stepped up to the podium first, his tailored suit gleaming under the lights. "For years," he began, "people have speculated about my life, about who I am, and what kind of family I should have. Today, I want to end the speculation. This is Rosa." He gestured to where she stood, trembling slightly. "She was once my daughter's caretaker. Today, she is more than that. She is the woman my daughter calls Mother. And she is the woman I have chosen to stand by my side." Gasps rippled through the room. Rosa swallowed hard as Richard gently guided her forward. Cameras clicked furiously. Her hands shook, but when she looked out into the sea of faces, she saw Lily smiling proudly from the front row. That gave her strength. "I'm not from wealth," Rosa said softly into the microphone. "I don't have titles or fame or beauty that fits magazine covers. What I do have is love. For this little girl who gave me a place in her heart, and for the man who trusted me with what mattered most. Families aren't always made the way the world expects. Sometimes they're chosen. And I choose them." The room went silent. Even the most cynical reporters hesitated before their pens scratched again. By the next morning, the story had exploded. Some mocked, of course. Some called it scandalous. But many, ordinary people across the world, found hope in it. Social media trended with hashtags like #LoveBeyondStatus and #SterlingFamily, filled with comments praising the courage it took to break boundaries. Back at the mansion, Lily skipped through the halls, chanting, "We're famous! We're famous!" Her innocence lightened the weight of it all. Rosa laughed, pulling her into her arms. That night, as they tucked Lily into bed, Richard looked at Rosa with an expression she had only dared dream of. "Whatever comes, Rosa, we'll face it together. You, me, and Lily. Our family." Tears welled in her eyes, but they were tears of joy. She had entered the Sterling mansion as a maid, unseen and unheard. Now, she was leaving behind that shadow forever. For the first time in her life, Rosa felt whole. The billionaire, his daughter, and the black maid, no longer roles divided by class or status, but threads woven together into a single story of love. A family, redefined.